Welcome to the Word and World webinar on football, the justice, and the gospel. And as I was sharing, I want to introduce myself. So I'm Alejandra Ortiz. I live in Mexico, and I serve in IFES as a secretary for research and global conversations, and in other capacities. And very excited to have this webinar hosted alongside Timote. And we come here, as I was mentioning, not as experts, but as fellow learners on a topic that we think is very important to talk about, and just also as a way that we can model to students and to staff how we can have a conversation and how we can talk about faith, the gospel, and justice about every topic of life and what's happening. And so we want to do that as if we were around a table. Some of us are drinking coffee. And again, we do it as brothers and sisters who are coming alongside each other to learn. So yeah, welcome again.
Yes, hello friends from my side as well. My name is Timothée José. I live in French-speaking Switzerland. You might hear the small French accent in my English. I'm very happy to host this webinar indeed with Ale. I serve as Engaging University Coordinator in IFES. And if even 2 or 3 months ago, someone would have told me I would host ever in my life a webinar on football, I would have laughed them out, because football is really not exactly what is using most of my mind these days. But I realize that if we want to serve students, if we want to listen to the concerns of students and society around us, which are values that are very, very high for Engaging University, we better talk about the topics that people are talking about. So this is why Ali and I thought it would be good to convene people who know much more about football than any of us does. And this is why we're looking forward to listening to their sharing. We plan on having a webinar that will last a short hour. It's not going to be a very long discussion. We'll have time for the speakers to share, a discussion with them, and then Q&A as well. So if you have questions during the time when the speakers speak, don't hesitate also to type the questions in the chat, that we can go back to them. You can have time to type them and we can go back to them. You can type them in Spanish, en français, or in English, of course. Again, interpretation is available, traduction disponible en bas dans les boutons. And now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce Johan. Johan Mvangi is a former IFES Tanzania staff. She's currently working with a Presbyterian church in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And Johan has volunteered during the FIFA World Cup 2022 in Qatar. So the last World Cup which happened. And so she's going to introduce to us her passion and the opportunities for ministry that she sees in those events. Johan, over to you.
Thank you so much. It is my joy to be part of this conversation. As I've been introduced, and like you, Timothy, before 2022, I would not have been on this space, but God, in his mysterious ways, works and shows us directions to follow. When this World Cup almost began, what came into my mind was how can I be involved? And the word that came into my mind is First Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32. It says, from the tribe of Issachar, there were 200 leaders of the tribe with their relatives. All these men understood the signs of the time and knew the best course for Israel to take. And for me, World Cup is not just football. My biggest hashtag has been every match a discipleship moment. So since this journey began, I've been looking at it that way. I actually did a graphic which has like 6 or 7 statements. The first one is every match a discipleship moment, every player a child of God, every fan a kingdom soul. It is more than a game, a kingdom moment. Christ glorified. Christ glorified. So as I said, in 2022, I had the opportunity to volunteer during the World Cup in Qatar. That's a long story, which I may not say right now because I would be the least person to be volunteering. Now, as the preparation for World Cup in North America, I still wanted to volunteer, but I knew getting the visa would be such a headache, and I decided I was not going to start that journey at all, at all. But that led me to ask myself this question. Like the sons of Issachar, what could I do in my context? And here are some of the ways that I have been involved in every match and discipleship moment. In the beginning of the month of May, I decided to host 4 conversations, which I called Faith and Football. And how I decided to do that is just send out an invitation to my friends. I took my contacts and shared to almost everyone, regardless of their commitment to football or not. And the 4 conversations were on Google. The first one was discipleship opportunities during World Cup. The second one was engaging boys and men in our families during World Cup. Obviously, you know, boys and men are the bigger percent in the World Cup, in football involvement. And the third one was prayer as a discipleship force during World Cup. And the fourth one was discipleship through social media during World Cup. And we did those 4 conversations in a span of 4 weeks, just before the World Cup began last week. And the second thing which I decided to do, I am a beneficiary of scripture engagement through IFES. And so I invited my friends, some of them former staff workers, and requested them, can we somehow prepare a Bible study guide which we can share with anyone who would be willing to receive it? And so we were 4 of us. All of us are no longer staff workers. 1 person in Uganda, 1 person in Kenya, and 2 of us in Tanzania. And so we titled it Word and World Cup, Child's 10 Studies. We prepared it in English, then translated in Swahili and French, and we just shared it out there for anyone who would like to engage. We used inductive Bible study, but very, very basic, not in depth. Yeah. And then the third thing which I've also been doing is, like I said, as a person who loves scripture, and I also love some graphic design, I decided to come up with something that I call Speak Scriptures to the Nations. So how that looks like is the graphic contains a Bible verse, like Psalms 33, verse 14, that the purposes of the nation, of the Lord in the nation will not be thwarted. And the other thing that is in that graphic is a nation's flag. And because now we have access to translation, if a nation main language is French, we do it in French. If it's in Spanish, we do it in Spanish. And all of these things, the main purpose is to help people see beyond all the darkness that we see in this space. It is still a kingdom moment. And then the fourth thing now that we've been doing since the World Cup began, it's something we are calling Kingdom Matches Conversation. What is Kingdom Matches Conversation is we invite people who have technical knowledge. One fun fact, I do not, for the many years I've been following football, I cannot tell you how offside is, what is offside? So, so I have not been the best person to be involved in the kingdom conversation, but we invite people who have the technical understanding, but also have missional thinking. And so we've done that for the opening match, South Africa and Mexico, and every African was rooting for Mexico because you know what is happening in South Africa. That's another kingdom conversation, not for now. We also had a conversation on Brazil versus Morocco, and every African was rooting for Brazil because of AFCON. If you have the background story, you know there's that tension. And also Senegal and France, again, divided continent, because France and Senegal, you can never tell unless, yeah. And then Ivory Coast and Germany. And we were focusing on critical matches where African teams are playing. And the conversations have been ending with a prayer for the two nations. And the biggest question we've always been asking, what God moments are you seeing in this period? What God moment are you seeing? Because without asking such a question, you might be able to see a lot of darkness, a lot of evil, and you miss out on what God is doing. Some of the highlights are some of the people that have been in those conversations saying, it is for the first time I'm seeing Christian players praying. And they are puzzled to see that because they have not been seeing that many, many times. And the other thing I'm still doing is decided to call it a World Cup prayer challenge, and again invited Christians to come together so that we pray. Initially, my desire was to just get 20 people, pray for 3 times a week, but it turned out to be more than that. We have people from Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Congo, Zimbabwe. And one request that we made was each of you should adopt at least one team that is playing the World Cup. And the other thing is, even if the team is eliminated, you have to still continue to pray for it. And as you know, most of our African teams have been eliminated, but we'll continue to pray for them. And the question is, what God moment are you seeing? For example, one of the days when South Africa is playing, that question has to keep coming because people are angry and there's a likelihood of not seeing God in all of that. So in conclusion, for me, this has been I looked at it. First of all, I wanted to go to get to North America, but because visa complications, I couldn't. But I decided I will not allow my heart to be discouraged. And that is why I have embarked on all of this. Even if most African countries have been eliminated, we will continue on with the prayer challenge because nations belong to God, whether they are Africans or they are not Africans. And every match remains a discipleship moment, either at home, in the students' hostels, in the cafeteria. It's an opportunity to glorify God. There might be too much darkness that keeps popping up, but one of my biggest encouragement is in the book of John, chapter 1, verse 5. The Bible says, and darkness did not overcome the light. And I'd like to conclude by saying, what God moment are you seeing in this world? In the next 17 days, let's take the posture of the same posture that Jesus would take. What would he be seeing? What would he be doing? As an African who feels a bit discouraged because most of our countries are out, how would I be how would Jesus respond if he was an African? It is a moment that the Lord will help us. So thank you so much. Let me end it there. Every match a discipleship moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanne, for your sharing. Your passion is really evident, and the way of taking all those opportunities. Thank you very much for giving us insights into your very important ministry at this time during the World Cup. You really open horizons, I'm sure, for many of us. Let me introduce the second speaker, who joins us from the US. Her name is Queenie Mae Mendazo Serrano. I hope I pronounced that well. She's the Director of Global Justice Programs in InterVarsity USA. So she speaks from where things are happening at the moment. Global Justice Program is called the Global Urban Trek. She lives in South Lake Tahoe in California and has been staff for almost 12 years works on campus as well. She loves nature and sports, and she has a BA in history and an MA in Asian American studies. And I'm hearing she is a big fan of football as well. So Queenie, over to you. We look forward to hearing your sharing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Timotei and Ale, for inviting me and letting me be part of this conversation. And yes, to all the things that you had shared. I am the director of global justice programs, and so my students are currently on a program right now. Very excited for them. And kind of like what Timotei said, I am an avid sports fan, mostly American football. So I just want to make the distinction, as I know that football has many definitions around the world, but American football, I grew up watching the NBA basketball. I played volleyball and basketball growing up, and slowly gotten into baseball because of this last World Series. And before I took on this role, I worked with international students and Black students and athletes. And one of the things that was super important in building community, as I think for a lot of IFES folks, is sports, and gathering students together to watch sports. And so I would remember hosting Super Bowl parties with my international students and my American students. A lot of my students from East Asia loved watching the NBA finals. So I would host NBA final games or watch parties at my house, or even hosting the opening night to the Olympics at my place. And so that was like a great
Queenie,
bring.
sorry, I'm doing football here. Please speak a bit slower. Interpreters
Oh,
are going to really struggle. Can you please
okay.
slow down? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, like I was saying, doing sports gatherings are one of the things that brought a lot of students together, whether they were American or whether they were international. And I think it brought out a lot of pride in the teams that we love, players that we admired, um, and even our countries, specifically when we were watching the Olympics. But there are also some hard realities with sports as well. And there have been some things that I have been observing, specifically in regards to the World Cup. So recently, my program, we launched our orientation in Houston, Texas, and that is where the orientation for the Global Urban Trek is. And Houston is one of the host cities in the United States for the World Cup. One of the days that we have during orientation is to partner with local organizations that are serving in Houston, Texas. And one of the organizations that we work with gives van tours to help its participants learn about human trafficking, and what are indicators of what kind of victims um, are human trafficked, or what kind of businesses you should look for. So there are lights and markers around parlors in Houston that indicate this is a place for sex workers or human trafficking. And it's really heavy and dark going through the van tour and observing and seeing people on the street, or even seeing houses or businesses with these markers. Um, and what we learned from this organization, that because of the World Cup, there has been an increase in human trafficking, specifically in commercial sex. And a lot of the victims that um, are human trafficked are Black and Brown people in the community. And we that's very hard. I think we're learning also from the organization the racial disparity about the type of women who are trafficked specifically. There's a train that runs along um, Houston, where they just pick up people all over the South to be human trafficked, um, and there's an increase of that when large games like the World Cup or the World Series or the Olympics. I'm thinking about LA, Los Angeles, for the Olympics in 2028. And so just holding that tension, and also recognizing that these parlors have indicators, right? That you can go around the city and see that there are um, actual things, or things that are plastered around these places so that you can get commercial sex. As a sports fan, I recognize that sports has the ability to bring people together, and to promote unity. I experienced this when I would host gatherings at my house with international students, specifically when there was the Olympics, and you're just everyone's cheering for their country and you're excited. I'm Filipina, so I was born in the Philippines, but I grew up here, and so very excited for any time the Philippines in our small country gets to participate. Um, but also as someone who resides in the United States and has grown up here, I am deeply grieved and lament the treatment of athletes and coaches and staff of people from the World Cup coming into the United States because of our current administration. Um, the fear mongering that has happened, um, specifically to non-white African Muslim cities, so people getting denied access or harassment at immigration. Um, I was watching an interview specifically from the players in Iran, and not being able to stay in the United States. After they played their game, they had to leave immediately. And the impact as an athlete, right, to be able to rest and to be able to take care of yourself, but having to leave. And I think about what it means to welcome people. And, I'm like talking about this with some of my friends and students, and I'm like, this just is not welcoming, right? This is not a value that we should also not just have as American citizens, but people who follow Jesus. Um, I think the politics of the United States is feeding into how teams are being treated, learning that there are travel bans and exemptions, higher policing at our borders and events. There are also visa bonds that tax a higher deposit for certain countries, reaching up to $15,000 for some of these bonds. Um, I think also the threat of ICE. So if folks are not familiar with ICE, the US Immigration and Custom Enforcement, the threats of them being at venues. Um, and what people don't realize, we have so many undocumented service workers, like they help our events function. And so just the threat of ICE being in these locations has also grieved me as a sports fan of how do I participate in loving these extracurricular activities and recognizing the dark side of these stuff. Um, I think in general in the United States, everybody loves their sports. And so we just see an increase of violence. We've seen this also with the NBA finals that just also finished right before FIFA. Or the World Cup, and we saw violence happening in New York against San Antonio fans and people being harassed and vandalism that is happening on the streets in the town. And my question is, what does it mean to care for your city as a fan? What does it mean to care for the land as a fan? What does it mean to care for the other fans who are coming into your city to watch? And so there's a lot of like broken shalom that we're seeing because of sports, right? And I love sports, I really do. And that's hard. That's hard to grapple with. So in conclusion, a few things I have been reflecting on is what does it mean to be a sports fan and recognize the injustices that exist behind sports, whether that's corruption, violence that undergirds sports. I think about how much in America, I don't know if this is true for other countries, the contracts that athletes get to play their sport and the disparity around that, the financial disparity around that, right? And yeah, what does it mean to be critical and what does it mean to be a fan? And how do I have these conversations with students about these realities as well? And those are my reflections. Thank you
Hmm.
again for the space. And thank you, Timotei and Ale for like, hey, slow down so we can translate. Thank you.
Hmm. Thank you very much, Queenie. Thank you for bringing both your love for for sports and how you've used this also to serve students within the U.S. and also just your reflections. I think the questions that you offer, your questions that you offer to us, I think also help us to think through these topics, not with a black and white understanding, but with or perspective, but with holding these tensions, with the invitation to hold these tensions, these things that tension. So thank you very much for being part of the webinar, of this adventure of having this conversation. And last but not least, I want to welcome Roberto Carvajal. So Roberto is connecting from the other one of the other hosts of the World Cup close to Mexico City. Roberto is the head of CUMPA's national office. So CUMPA is the Mexican Student Ministry that is part of IFES. And Roberto has served for more than a decade, for many years, in student ministry. And he also has studies in communications and public policy, political communication. And he's also a fan of football, but also he was bringing and sharing some reflections of what it means for Mexico to host the World Cup. So I'm very excited to welcome Robert, my friend, and to have you with us. I want to say something before he starts. So if you are only English speaker, so if you do not speak one of the languages of heaven, which is Spanish, then you have to go to the interpretation booth and choose Spanish to English, so that you're actually able to understand Roberto. So I'm hoping that everyone is doing that now. If you need that translation, if you have a problem, just put it in the chat there. And with no further ado, Roberto, welcome. Bienvenido, Robert. Te escuchamos.
Muchas gracias, Ale. Gracias a todos por este espacio que brindan, que crean para que pues podamos abrir este tipo de conversaciones, ¿verdad? Sazonadas con buen humor, con pensar que estamos todos a la mesa compartiendo el café. Bueno, como Timothy dice, ahorita el café ya no, pero alguna otra bebida puede ser. Bueno, comentaba que este evento es un evento sin precedentes. Desde su invención en 1930, que fue el primer evento de la FIFA organizado de forma mundial con 13 participantes en Uruguay, pasando después a 32 selecciones, y este año 48 selecciones nacionales de las diferentes federaciones continentales se están congregando en 3 países de América: Estados Unidos, Canadá y México, ¿verdad? Este evento nos ha regalado, yo como bien lo dijo Ale, como aficionado, como hincha, nos ha regalado encuentros muy vistosos, muy disputados. En el terreno del campo, en el terreno del juego, la, la diferencia no se ha notado. Eh, Justo esta semana, por ejemplo, Marruecos ha dejado fuera a Países Bajos, siendo uno de los partidos más vistosos de los últimos tiempos, pero sobre todo también ha dejado historia en el contexto deportivo. Es el último país, digo, perdón, es la última participación de Cristiano Ronaldo y de Messi en la historia de los mundiales. Será muy difícil que puedan volver a participar, por la edad, obviamente, pero están haciendo historia al ser 5 de los jugadores con más de 5 copas del mundo en la actualidad. México tiene uno, no ha jugado todos sus mundiales, ha jugado 4 de 6. Estamos hablando de nuestro portero, Guillermo Ochoa. Pero no todo es fiesta, no todo es el gran show, yo así le digo, el gran show de la FIFA, ¿no? Sino que también está representado por desafíos que giran alrededor del poder y del dinero, ¿no? Un cambio muy notorio, por ejemplo, para nosotros como aficionados del fútbol, ha sido con el famosísimo tiempo de hidratación. Nos regalan a veces en partidos muy disputados, cortan el juego, 3 minutos y se van a hidratar pero no, quitan las escenas deportivas y de inmediato aparecen comerciales. O es obvio, ¿no? Que es lo que está priorizando la FIFA. Porque no está priorizando el cuidado integral del jugador. Si no, no dejaría que los jugadores, sobre todo en Europa, estén disputando más de 4 partidos por semana. O sea, es un alto nivel y no tiene que ver con el cuidado integral del jugador, ¿no? Son 3 minutos de comerciales que están generando, ¿no? Y por último, nosotros en México, ¿no? La FIFA nos otorgó 13 partidos que ya se han celebrado. El último es el siguiente domingo entre México e Inglaterra. Y en México no hay forma en que la población general tenga acceso a partidos con tan exorbitantes precios, muy costosos. No hay forma. Entonces, los mexicanos consumen a través de los espacios digitales, que también elevaron sus precios. La FIFA puso medidas donde los espacios como negocios no pueden transmitir si no pagan un permiso de transmisión deportiva, ¿no? Entonces, todo gira alrededor del costo-beneficio, todo, absolutamente todo. Y en medio de estos como desafíos de ser sede, aunque con pocos partidos, pero sede al final, ¿no? También podemos encontrar otros contextos naturales de nosotros los mexicanos, ¿no? Uno de ellos muy significativo es el de las madres buscadoras, ¿no? Que aprovechando la atención del mundo, eh, aprovechando el flujo del turismo en nuestro país, han salido a protestar, cerca sobre todo de 2 de los estadios sede de 3, en Guadalajara y en Ciudad de México, para hacer, sí, justamente visible su crisis de más de 130,000 desaparecidos en el país, ¿no? Han cerrado avenidas principales, las estampitas Panini imprimieron las estampitas mismas, pero con rostros de sus hijos desaparecidos, ¿no? Han visibilizado mucha propaganda que transmite su dolor. Eso estamos viviendo en la sede del Mundial. Y están siendo detenidos, reprimidos, encapsulados para no manifestarse, ¿verdad? Y en medio de este contexto de fiesta, pero también de protesta, nosotros, ¿qué propósito tenemos como hijos del reino? Esa es como una pregunta, ¿no? Creamos puentes, ¿no? Que se extienden hasta las madres buscadoras y hasta los aficionados de fútbol. ¿Qué oportunidades tenemos? Ejemplo, no sé, estos días en casa, o nuestra casa, su casa, como buen mexicano, su casa, mi casa, su casa. Hemos generado un espacio, ¿verdad?, para ver el partido de fútbol, ¿no? La belleza del fútbol, el duelo en medio del campo, ese espacio de 100 minutos, pero sí sazonado con gritos, con comida, la mejor comida, con mucha emoción. Y luego el partido no termina ahí. Sigue el diálogo de los amigos que llegaron. Eh, Pasamos a hablar de lo que está girando alrededor del mundial y nosotros identificamos nuestro servicio para con ellos, ¿verdad? Hacemos comunidad, mostramos nuestra fe, se vuelve un espacio de diálogo seguro y hablar de fútbol pasa a segundo o hasta tercer término. Nos vemos hablando de justicia, de lucha, de reino. Y creo que eso es lo que podemos aprovechar también de este magno evento, ¿no? El diálogo que nos permite conectar, que nos permite hacer puentes, que nos permite servir al otro, que nos permite poder compartir la mesa, que nos permite disfrutar de este evento donde Marruecos está demostrando su nivel futbolístico, pero también, a manera de conclusión, que tenemos también un espacio seguro para debatir nuestras ideas, para hablar sobre justicia e injusticia, sobre desafíos y luchas, ¿no? Alrededor de un evento deportivo. Y no podemos dejar de disfrutarlo, ¿eh? De verdad no podemos dejar de disfrutar la belleza de lo lindo que es el fútbol. Pero también debemos abrirnos, abrazarnos, servir, llorar juntos, donde ya no todo es fútbol. Entonces, eso es lo que quería compartir, que sea un espacio sí de gozar y disfrutar, pero también de abrazar y llorar, ¿verdad? Entonces, me quedo con eso, me quedo con la parte donde podemos seguir cultivando, seguir disfrutando, seguir criticando y seguir socializando. Entonces, es todo lo que quiero comentar.
Muchas gracias, Roberto. Muchas gracias por tus reflexiones también de lo que traes como alguien que ama el fútbol y que también está pensando y abriendo estos espacios y creando estos puentes, ¿no? Vamos a pasar al canal en inglés. So we're going to transition back to going into English for those who need to get out of the translation channel. So we can continue with the second part. And just I'm very excited to be able to listen to our three speakers today, as I mean there are many different things that we can highlight, but I think the fact that we can hear about the love of the sport and how we can connect, how can we use this as an opportunity to share the gospel, to talk about very key issues, but also just to creating space for other things, as Robert was saying, and then how do we do that? How do we do this? And both Queenie, Robert, and Joanne giving us examples of that. We want to offer an opportunity for our speakers to interact with each other if there's something briefly that we'd want to share. But in the meantime, we want to give you a chance to think about a question if you have one. We're going to open for Q&A for the last 10 minutes. So if you have a question for one of our speakers or for the three of them, please put it in the chat. But I do want to give a chance for Queenie, Robert, Joanne to provide maybe a response if there's something that you would want to share. So Queenie, Joanne, Robert, is one of you ready to share something?
Bien, a mí lo que me llamaba mucho la atención era de Joan, como su participación voluntaria en 2022 y que ahora por razones de visado le fue difícil poder ser voluntaria nuevamente, pero me llamó la atención mucho como esta parte que ella comentaba acerca de cómo se demuestra la fe en los espacios públicos, en este caso en los eventos deportivos. Es que algo que se me hizo muy curioso después del partido de Marruecos contra Países Bajos, el equipo marroquí fue y hizo un acto religioso, ¿no? Y eso, por ejemplo, cuando lo estábamos viendo con los amigos, como que dijeron, qué curioso que se hincaron frente a la afición. No fue así, ellos se hincaron en dirección a la Meca, ¿no? Pero lo curioso fue que pude entablar un diálogo de conversación de fe y religión con mis amigos. O sea, eso me permitió crear un puente de comunicación para hablar de la fe que se vive en medio de las justas mundialistas, ¿verdad? Entonces, fue muy interesante ver que ellos desconocían que ellos estaban haciendo este acto como religioso y que al darme cuenta de eso, pude aprovechar para poder meter en la conversación diálogo sobre la fe. ¿Me explico? O sea, eso es lo curioso de estas justas mundialistas, pues, o sea, que me llamaba mucho la atención de lo que decía Joan, ¿no? También nos encontramos, sí, es verdad, a muchos jugadores que levantan las manos, ¿no? Como apuntando al cielo, que oran antes de empezar un partido o cuando anotan un gol. Pero, digamos, nosotros, en mi caso, desde un país con cosmovisión cristiana, como es lo más común, Entonces, como hablar de la fe desde ahí, de lo común, como que no hay mucho diálogo, pero cuando fue en un sentido diferente, eso a mí sí me permitió hablar y tener diálogos relacionados con la fe, partiendo desde un acto de culminación de un partido donde tuvo la victoria Marruecos. Entonces, eso se me hizo muy interesante.
Muchas gracias, Robert. Thank you very much. Joanne, I think we had a bit of a audio difficulty at a point. So so please go ahead. We can hear you.
All right, thank you so much. My reflection is just a brief one, and it goes back to the Word of God. There are two scriptures that have kept coming back to us as we've been praying. The first one is Psalms chapter 82, verse 8. Psalms chapter 82, verse 8, which says, "Rise up, O God, and judge the earth. All the nations belong to you." Keeping that in mind as we process everything that is happening, sometimes feeling unfair, sometimes I am a Kenyan. Kenya has never qualified for World Cup. Yeah, and it's that no good players and all that, but the struggle of injustices because of people who are stewarding this space is not stewarding in ways that honor God. But I have kept keeping this word. The nations belong to you, and also Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 14. Habakkuk chapter verse 14 says, "For as the waters fill the sea, the earth will be filled with the knowledge." The version I'm reading here is New Translation, which says, "An awareness of the great God." There's even in my praying, that is what I've clung to, that the stadiums, the locker rooms, the hotels, even the brothels, all these spaces that they will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of God. In my limit, Habakkuk 2:14, in my limited understanding and exposure, it is very difficult to believe that. I believe in God, and that is what has kept me going. And I thought of sharing those two scriptures. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to share that I appreciated what Roberto was saying. To be another host country and share his perspective too was really helpful from the Mexico side. And also the invitation of like, we can love these sports and we have to hold the dark sides that come out of events like this. So, I was like, oh man, that's so hard to love something and then also see the dark side of the sport. So I really appreciated what he said.
Thank you. Thank you all for responding to each other and for bringing more insights into the conversation. So as we said, we are opening up for some question and answers, some Q&A. So if you have a question, you can write it down in the chat, or if you're not able, you can raise your hand and briefly ask the question. So please go ahead. If there's something, we encourage the conversation. But also if not, I know Timotei always has questions. So then in the meantime, he might ask one.
Yeah, thank you, Ale. Yes, in the meantime, please, I'm sure there are people who are more fans of football and who will need to ask their questions. I was wondering, we talk about the World Cup sports justice and the gospel. What about university sports? Because I believe in many countries, sports are a big part of university life. Do you see, Rohan, Queenie, Roberto, do you see any such discussions? Do you see sports as being a place where issues are discussed, or where you also see justice issues at play that the national movements have been able to engage one way or the other? Is there something you could share in here?
Yeah, I can share. I love college sports, specifically college football, American football. And one of the conversations that we often hear is around like mental health, specifically, which is a justice issue, around the pressures that that students feel as athletes. And then there are some contracts, right? Financial contracts, and who gets the financial contracts versus um, depending on an athlete, right? But I know mental health has been a huge conversation around athletes. Like there has been just a trigger warning, right, for like suicide rates for athletes, particular athletes. Then they go into the NFL or the NBA, different professional leagues, and you see continual mental health decline. And so I think my question is like, what kind of mental health and holistic care are we providing for college athletes, especially when you come into moving from the college world into a more professional one and the pressures that go with that? But we have seen a lot of, just rates in suicide rates in mental health for college athletes as well.
Thank you, Queenie. I think we can go ahead and answer one of the, go with the first question here in the chat from Peter from Nepal. And he asks, there are many players who are very good and can be an idol for anyone. Like I'm fond of Modric from Croatia and Ricardo Kaká from Brazil. What is the healthy side of being a football fan, including if you're a fan of Ronaldo or only Messi? So I don't know if there's someone there who could speak on that.
Let me respond by giving a context. I live in Tanzania, and you can go search, and in Tanzania, there are two big teams, like the way Manchester United and which one now, something like that. The real life rally sort of. One is called Simba, and the other is called Yanga. And actually, one of them just won the title for the 5th time. And I can tell you the amount of banting that goes on, even banting is like, making fun of one another, is so big. I am a fan of the team that won the title for the 5th time. But one of the ways that I have learned is I have to ask myself the first question: what do I post online, like on my social media? Just in as much as I'm enjoying the winning and whatnot. That is the first thing. The second thing, I have had the privilege of interacting with the players, some of these professional players. So for me, I no longer see them as just people that I idolize. I have had the privilege of hearing the struggles they go through. Like sometimes when you ask them, how can I be praying for you? The first prayer will be that I don't get an injury. But when you're out there, when you don't know their inner life, you only think it's just score goals and, become the top scorer. So I'd say quickly is, understanding them, like, which is the best word? Is there something like sport incarnation, just becoming like them, even without something like that would be a helpful thing. Seeing them beyond the glory, seeing them beyond the success, and seeing them as your fellow child. And the second thing is also the health. Another health way, which has also been helping me, is now allowing them to become part of my prayer list, praying for someone that, quote unquote, I would idolize. In that, I realize that he is equally in need of a savior. He's equally in need of help from God. I would respond quickly like that. That has been helping me. Yeah.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you very much. I think we can go also ahead to tackle this last question by Arpan from India. To build the bridge for the students with sports and faith, what would be your suggestions or activities we can have so that there would be engaging conversations that could lead us to share the gospel? So I think our three speakers brought some ideas on this, but maybe Roberto, you would want to share como some of the things he also mentioned, actividades, sugerencias de cómo puede surgir conversaciones para crear puentes, ¿no? Para hablar sobre el evangelio.
Sí, justamente pienso en que poder interesarnos de forma genuina por el otro es clave, no solo por el tema del deporte, sino en general. Am, Cuando pienso en puentes que comuniquen y no muros que impidan el diálogo, pienso que tenemos que tener una disposición de aprender del otro o de la actividad del otro. Y de repente, cuando estaba en el contexto universitario, en México es diferente, ¿no? O sea, sí hay becas para deportistas, pero no como en otros países quizás. Entonces, quien se dedicaba a un deporte en la universidad era como visto como de, no desaproveches la universidad. Entonces, el puente en este caso era como poder entender o poder escuchar al otro o poder justamente ser un espacio de diálogo y no un espacio de, de separación, ¿no? Pero pasa igual con todos los otros contextos, o sea, no solo el deportivo. Creo que tenemos que siempre estar dispuestos a escuchar y aprender lo que el otro hace, o más bien a interesarnos de una forma genuina, orgánica, para que podamos tender puentes que comuniquen y no muros que nos dividan, ¿verdad? Porque puede ser que sí, que podamos tener una posición de, no, la FIFA es solo corrupción, la FIFA es solo dinero, la FIFA es todo lo malo que existe en el mundo. Y ya, ponemos muro. Pero ¿y si escuchamos? ¿Y si miramos más allá de eso que está ahí, que es verdad, que está presente? Pero ¿cómo tendemos puentes? ¿No? Oh, mira, ¿en serio Messi a esa edad está haciendo tantos goles? Ah, qué interesante. Y puedo generar diálogo. Pero lo mismo en un caso más local, más contextual, ¿no? ¿Cómo
Mm,
puedo brindar espacios de puente y no un muro que impide el diálogo?
mm. Muchas gracias, Roberto. Thank you very much. Um, we are going to take the last question that's in our chat there. It's going to be the last question we'll talk about. And it's Sam from Belgium that asks, how can student ministries engage with the World Cup in a way that forms students both as witnesses to the gospel and as people who can recognize and respond to the injustices connected to global football? Have you seen examples of this being done well, especially since raising these issues can sometimes feel like ruining the joy and atmosphere around the tournaments? So I love how this question frames a lot of why we're here. And also, Robert already started pointing to that. And I think all our three speakers pointed to that. But I love that we have this question as a way to end. So if Joanne, Queenie, also Robert, if you have something else to put forward, this would be a last time to participate. So yeah, Queenie, Joanne, as a start.
Yeah, I love that question. I think if we provided spaces for lament and grief and helping students understand that it's not either or, it's both and, right? That, like, yes, we love this sport. I think even if you did a framing before we had an event, right? Like, we're going to watch the Super Bowl or we're going to watch this game. I also want to recognize that we're in Houston or we're in this place that is experiencing injustice because of this sport, and we're holding that. And I also still want us to have a good time. I think it's helping students see that we our faith is nuance, and how we engage with our faith is not just a black and white. It is very nuanced in this, and giving them space. Like, yeah, like if people want to process after this game, we're going to hold a lament or just like a conversation if people had some tension. But we all want to gather in community. But if you're having some tension, we can have some processing space. So I've done different things like that where I've held events and I know that it might land poorly for some of my students. And so offering like, hey, if that was hard for some of you, I'm going to take some of you out for ice cream after and we can have a conversation, right? To provide, like, we're seeing everyone in the room and that you have a perspective. And then how do you pastor them through that? And then also give that invitation and share why this group of students feel this particular way. Which I think is really helpful when you can provide both like a place of celebration and a place of lament and grief. For like, yeah, like, that was really hard to watch, and processing that. Like every moment that we spend with students, whether it is just something fun like sports, can be a discipleship moment of, yeah, and here's some of the dark sides too, right? And so I think making sure that we give processing space for both, I think can be helpful.
Oh, thank you very much, Queenie. Yeah. Joanne, would you like to share? Robert, any closing remarks?
Yeah, after the match yesterday between England and DRC, DR Congo is in East Africa. So the entire East Africa was rallying behind DRC. On this WhatsApp group, the World Cup Red Challenge that we have. So people started commenting. Someone said it's heartbreaking that DR Congo has to go home, but we thank God he has taken them this far. Then someone else said Congo have played a bold game, though pushing till to the end was a challenge. Then someone came and said they have played for the first time in 52 years. God has really seen them through. So after that mention of 52 years, the conversation shifted from the pain to it is an encouragement. I agree with what Queenie is saying, creating space for conversations and conversations that, and I'm thinking this is where even graduates come in, and graduates come in because they've had experience of going through losses and pain and suffering, and they are able to really journey with these young people as they process, because some of these losses are pretty big. And I would conclude by saying one of the challenges I had before the World Cup began, I was talking to someone from one of the movements, and I asked that, what if we prepared a Bible study guide that is purely sports oriented, not necessarily football, that it can be a gift to the movement, so that, because if I have not seen a study guide that is specific from any IFES movement, so I was challenging the person, but in a good way. That is one tool that can allow people to have conversations at any point there's a major tournament. For example, like us in East Africa, next year we are going to host AFCON. AFCON is the World Cup for Africa, and we definitely need to prepare well. And for those of us who've been following, there's still a lot of injustices that is happening in AFCON. Just a few months ago, Senegal had won, and then afterwards it was not Senegal anymore. And people are still recovering from that. So I'm thinking a study guide is a tool that can help people having conversations even beyond the moment of playing. And so, yeah, that's what comes to my mind. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being part of this conversation.
Robert, go ahead.
Sí, siempre que pienso en el movimiento estudiantil, pienso que es un espacio seguro y que somos la opción la tercera opción de la rebeldía. Es decir, no estamos en el lado izquierdo o derecho o negro o blanco, sino que somos el espacio que puede disfrutar la justa mundialista sin dejar de mirar, ¿no? Lo injusto que hay alrededor. No lo hacemos desde la tibieza, sino desde de la realidad de la rebeldía que nos permite el reino de proponer, de ser esa opción diferente, ¿no? Que no nos ponen, no, no vean mundial porque pues no es de Dios. No, sí véanlo porque es un espacio que podemos disfrutar. No, o sea, disfrutemos, pero también miremos con la mirada del reino, ¿no? Y eso es lo que quiero concluir, que somos ese espacio seguro de la rebeldía del reino.
Thank you very much, Robert, indeed, for yes, for sharing also those perspectives that are really needed and helpful, and that give us a broad perspective. And I think helping students and helping staff in IFES to see those conversations are as not all the time either or, that not necessarily fostering tribalism or tensions and so on, but managing to seeing those different aspects together is very important. Friends, thanks so much for joining us. We'll be closing in a few seconds. I would just like to thank all you who attended, all our wonderful speakers. Please clap virtually for our interpreters. They have been doing a marvelous job also making it possible. We constantly try and attempt to have those Word and Word webinars interpreted at least in those 3 languages, maybe in more in the future. Please also do have a look at the Word and World Journal, including the previous issues that aim at providing spaces for discussions and exchanges of view on complicated topics. There will be, and this is just teasing you now, the next issue is in AI and human identity. So if you go to the website now and you sign up, you will automatically receive the next issues directly delivered into your mailbox, and I might have some author conversations in a webinar format as well. We also do have an Engaging University playlist that gathers some speakers and some speeches and some other elements from previous IFES events. Please have a look. Why not watch them also with some of your friends and colleagues and students to prompt conversations, adapt them to your local respective context. Friends, it was a pleasure hosting you today. Thanks again for the speakers, and we look forward to having you in our next World and Word webinar, which is not scheduled yet, which is not even planned yet, but it will, God willing, surely happen. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and let his face shine upon you and give you peace as you continue serving and being ambassadors of light wherever God has placed you. Bye-bye, friends.